I discovered my wife's affair during her writing workshop, hired a PI, gathered evidence, and vanished without a trace before she returned home. Andrew Baker had always believed in simplicity. He lived by the code of transparency and honesty. His friends, though fond of him, knew him as A.B. rather than Andy. This distinction was important, a reflection of who he had become over the years, a man with a clear identity, who valued his self-worth and his family above all else. Life for Andrew had always been predictable. And for the most part, that was comforting. He was an engineer working for a major national corporation. His days were filled with projects, colleagues, and sometimes, a sporadic beer or a plate of nachos shared with friends. His job was stable, his life was routine, and everything seemed to fit neatly within his expectations. It was a life that most would envy, a loving wife, 2 bright daughters, and a house in North Carolina, nestled in the vibrant community of the Research Triangle. The marriage with Karen was built on mutual dreams. For 25 years, they had grown together. They sacrificed their personal pursuits, trading in dreams for reality, as many do when children arrive and the responsibilities of life begin to take over. Sailing had once been Andrew's passion, but when the demands of fatherhood and marriage became greater, the yacht was sold, replaced with family picnics, school events, and weekend road trips. Karen had her own sacrifices. Once a high-spirited writer with dreams of authoring novels, she settled for teaching high school English, finding solace in nurturing young minds. Their daughters, Claire and Denise, were their pride. Both girls were accomplished students, earning scholarships at prestigious universities, Claire in Rhode Island and Denise in Boston. Watching their daughters leave for college left Andrew and Karen with a bittersweet emptiness. It was the start of a new chapter, a time to reconnect as partners, to rediscover the couple they once were before they became mom and dad. Andrew envisioned romantic dinners, weekend getaways, and a rekindling of their shared intimacy. But something shifted. Karen began to change. It started with her renewed interest in writing, something Andrew encouraged wholeheartedly. She joined writing workshops and groups, where she immersed herself in the creative process that she had put on hold for so long. She seemed invigorated, full of excitement about her writing. And Andrew, happy to see her passionate again, supported her. However, as time went on, he noticed that her interest wasn't just in the writing, it was in something, or rather someone, else. Karen spoke often about the people in her writing group, particularly Frank. She described Frank as an insightful critic and a great listener. Initially, Andrew thought nothing of it. Writers bonded over shared creativity, and Frank was simply a colleague. But soon, Karen's enthusiasm for her writing meetings grew into something more consuming, a need that seemed to pull her further away from Andrew. She would laugh at Frank's jokes in ways Andrew hadn't seen in years, her eyes sparkling with a kind of admiration that didn't sit right with him. The tipping point came when Karen announced that she had been accepted into a prestigious 6-week writing workshop in Illinois. She was ecstatic. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Andrew, she said, her eyes filled with excitement. Andrew tried to be supportive. He suggested he might visit her during the program or perhaps take time off work to be with her. But each time he mentioned it, Karen brushed off the idea, insisting that she would be too busy, that it wasn't the right environment for him. It was then that Andrew's suspicions grew into a gnawing unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Karen's excitement than just her love for writing. He overheard her on the phone one night, her voice dripping with excitement. "I can't wait, 6 whole weeks without any responsibilities. No one waiting for me to get back." The words stung like ice-cold water to his face. He tried to rationalize it, but the doubt was now an unignorable presence in his mind. Unwilling to live with this uncertainty, Andrew hired a private investigator. He needed to know. It was a decision that he struggled with. It felt like a betrayal of the trust they had built over decades. But his instinct told him there was something deeply wrong, and he couldn't continue to ignore it. The investigator was thorough. He tracked Karen during her time at the workshop, discreetly monitoring her interactions and movements. The truth, when it arrived, came like a heavy blow. Photos, videos, and reports revealed the undeniable: Karen and Frank were having an affair. It wasn't just a casual fling, it was full of intimacy and connection. The kind that Andrew had once believed was only shared between him and Karen. Frank, the man from the writing group, was the source of Karen's renewed passion, not the writing itself. The moment Andrew saw the evidence, he felt an emptiness he had never known before. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the realization that the life he had built, the sacrifices he had made, and the love he had given had been taken for granted. The woman he had loved for over 2 decades, who had borne his children, had found excitement not in their future together, but in the thrill of secrecy, in a life that excluded him. Andrew confronted Karen. He laid the evidence before her, his voice calm but his heart in turmoil. She denied it at first, tried to deflect, claimed it was just inspiration for her writing, nothing more than harmless fun. But the proof was irrefutable. When faced with the undeniable, Karen broke down. She tried to blame Andrew, saying that he had been too predictable, too caught up in his work, too absent. She said she had needed excitement, inspiration, something to make her feel alive again. It was a conversation that left Andrew hollow. The betrayal was bad enough, but the excuses, the attempt to make him responsible for her actions, cut deeper. He realized then that there was no saving their marriage. The trust was gone, and with it, the foundation upon which they had built their lives. He made the decision to leave. He packed his things while Karen was still at the workshop, left a note, and vanished from the life they had shared. Andrew moved to Portland, Maine, taking up a transfer offered by his company. It was a fresh start, one that he desperately needed. The first few weeks were a blur of paperwork, moving boxes, and sleepless nights. He missed his daughters terribly. Claire and Denise were devastated when they learned the truth. He shared the evidence with them, not to vilify their mother, but because they deserved honesty. They were hurt, angry, and confused. They promised to support their father. But Andrew knew that the fracture in their family was something they would all carry for a long time. As the months went by, Andrew slowly began to rebuild. He found solace in new routines, early morning jogs along the Maine coast, evenings spent at local diners, where he got to know the people in his new community. He rekindled his love for sailing, joining a local sailing club and eventually buying a small boat. The salty air, the sound of the waves against the hull, and the feeling of the wind filling the sails brought him a kind of peace that he hadn't felt in years. He also made new friends, people who knew nothing of his past, who accepted him for who he was now. There was Henry, his new manager, who invited him to barbecues and introduced him to the warmth of Maine hospitality. There were the members of the sailing club, who welcomed him without question, who shared stories of their own lives, full of both triumphs and mistakes. And then there was Evelyn, a fellow sailor who had her own scars from a past relationship. They bonded over their shared love for the sea and their understanding of heartbreak. Evelyn had been through a betrayal of her own. She spoke openly about it, her voice steady but her eyes revealing the pain that still lingered. "It's not the betrayal itself," she said one evening as they sat on the deck of Andrew's boat, watching the sunset. "It's the loss of the future you thought you were going to have. That's what hurts the most." Her words resonated with Andrew. He had lost not just his wife, but the life he had imagined for them, growing old together, watching their daughters thrive, celebrating anniversaries that marked their journey. Slowly, Andrew began to let go of the anger. He realized that holding onto it would only keep him tied to the past, to a life that no longer existed. He chose instead to focus on the present, on the friendships he was building, on the new experiences that awaited him, on the simple joy of a day spent out on the water. He learned to appreciate the small moments, a good cup of coffee, the sound of laughter at a dinner party, the warmth of the sun on his face. One weekend, Claire and Denise came to visit him in Maine. It was the first time they had all been together since the divorce. They spent the day exploring the town, eating lobster rolls, and laughing at stories from their childhood. That evening, they sat on the beach, a small fire crackling before them. Denise, always the more outspoken of the two, looked at her father and said, "Dad, I know this isn't the life you wanted, but I think you're doing okay. I think you're going to be okay." Her words, simple yet profound, brought tears to Andrew's eyes. It was the validation he hadn't realized he needed. In the end, Andrew's journey was not just about betrayal, it was about resilience. It was about finding himself again after losing everything he thought he knew. It was about realizing that life, even when it doesn't go according to plan, can still be beautiful. He had loved Karen, and he had lost her. But in that loss, He found something he hadn't expected, a deeper understanding of himself. A renewed appreciation for the people who stood by him. And a belief that, no matter what, he could still find joy. Andrew's journey is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the heartbreak, despite the loss, he found a way to move forward, to find joy, and to create a new life for himself. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is hope, and that, sometimes, the life we never planned for can turn out to be exactly what we need. Wife had an affair with my stepfather to steal the $1 million mansion. But little did she know it was mine. From the very first day I saw her, I thought Kia was the one, bright eyes full of ambition. A smile that lit up the room, and a soul that seemed to radiate warmth. Little did I know, behind that dazzling exterior lay motives and ambitions that were anything but pure. My name is Michael, and this is a story about betrayal, greed, and a shocking secret that tore apart my life. Stick around, because what you are about to hear is something straight out of a thriller movie, full of twists, deceit, and ultimately, a surprising sense of freedom. Kia and I had been married for 7 years. I thought we were a strong couple. Sure, we had our share of ups and downs. But what marriage doesn't? I used to believe that those disagreements were just a part of our journey. When she complained that I was too close to my mother, I thought it was her way of saying she wanted more of my attention. And perhaps, it was her attempt to carve her space in my life. My mother, Mary, was my rock. She raised me alone after my dad left us, giving me everything she could, often beyond her means. When she married Andrew, I wasn't thrilled, but seeing my mother find companionship after years of loneliness, I did my best to accept it. Mary and Andrew were together for 10 years. A somewhat odd match if you ask me. Andrew was polite, a bit distant, but my mother seemed happy. And that was all that mattered. After she passed away 2 years ago, it was just Andrew left in that big house. I kept my distance from him, honestly. He never felt like a father figure. More like an awkward stranger I had to tolerate for my mother's sake. I figured that once she was gone, I had no obligation to maintain a relationship with Andrew. So I stayed away. That distance was comfortable, until I saw something that turned my world upside down. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. I had left the office early to meet an old friend, and on my way there, I passed a roadside cafe. Through the window, I saw my wife, Kia, sitting there with Andrew. His arm was draped over her shoulders. It wasn't the friendly hug of a stepfather comforting his daughter-in-law, no. It was something else. It was intimate, and the look in Kia's eyes was unmistakable. The easy chemistry between them shocked me to my core. I found myself doubting what I saw. But deep down, something had clicked into place. Everything I thought was secure in my life now felt fragile and fake. When I got home, I confronted Kia. She seemed startled. Her face went pale, and she stammered as she tried to explain. "Oh, I ran into Andrew by chance. And we decided to grab lunch together," she said. Her excuse was flimsy at best. There was something in her eyes, a fear I had never seen before. She knew I had seen something that I shouldn't have. She even tried to play the pity card, saying Andrew was lonely and grieving, and she was just comforting him. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but something inside me told me that wasn't the whole story. I decided I wasn't going to confront her any further until I had more proof. Kia worked weekends at a nail salon, which meant she was off during the weekdays. This had never bothered me before. But now, I started questioning everything. I used to be content thinking she was busy with work. But what if she wasn't? I needed to know what was really going on. So, I bought a GPS tracker and placed it in her car. Maybe it was paranoia or maybe just a gut feeling, either way. I felt like my sanity depended on knowing the truth. On the day that changed everything, the tracker showed that Kia was driving toward Andrew's house. She arrived there just before lunchtime. I wanted to catch them red-handed, but I feared barging in and finding nothing incriminating would make me look foolish. So, I called my friend Keith and explained the situation. He agreed to help, even suggesting that he could make an excuse to check on Andrew while recording everything on his phone. The house had a side entrance that led directly to the living room, and Keith could enter discreetly without alerting anyone. It was risky, but Keith was my best friend, and I knew I could trust him. Keith went in, his phone camera rolling. What he captured, or rather, what he didn't capture, was enough for me. He accidentally had the front camera on, but he did manage to record the muffled voices and even some shouting. What he described later was enough to confirm my worst fears. He found Kia and Andrew in the bedroom, embracing without any clothes. He rushed out quickly, but not before Andrew noticed and chased after him. Keith apologized, pretending he was just checking on Andrew. He left before the situation escalated any further. That was all I needed. I didn't go back home. Instead, I went straight to Keith's place, where I stayed for the next several days. Kia kept calling and texting, wondering when I was coming home. I ignored every single message. I ghosted her because, at that point, I couldn't even look at her without feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and disgust. I was done. I contacted a lawyer and started preparing the divorce papers. The divorce process wasn't easy, mostly because Kia refused to sign anything. She wanted to talk, to explain, but I didn't see the point. My lawyer advised that an out-of-court settlement would be quicker and cheaper. So I reluctantly agreed to meet her in person. She tried to hug me when she saw me, but I pushed her away. She tried to say that everything was a misunderstanding, the same thing cheaters always say. I wasn't buying any of it. Then, she dropped a bombshell that made my head spin. She claimed she was only with Andrew to protect our future. Your mother left everything to Andrew. If he married someone else, that woman would get it all. I was doing this for us. She said, it was all about the mansion, the $1 million mansion my mother left behind. She thought that by seducing Andrew, she could secure it for us. What she didn't know was that the mansion was already willed to me. My mother trusted me enough to know that I would let Andrew stay as long as he needed. And so I had left the paperwork unchanged, giving Andrew the appearance of ownership. Kia had been plotting, trying to manipulate her way into owning something that was never meant for her. Her greed had driven her into Andrew's arms, and now she was trying to justify it by saying it was all for our future. I laughed in her face. No thanks. Good luck with your mansion, I said as I walked out. After the divorce was finalized, I thought that would be the end of it. But Kia didn't give up. She kept calling, showing up at my work, my gym, even the mansion. She tried everything, begging, yelling, blaming me for everything. She even said that she had only slept with Andrew for my sake, to secure the mansion for me. The audacity was mind-blowing. I ignored her every time, refusing to let her back into my life. Eventually, I had to get a restraining order just to keep her away from the mansion and myself. Andrew, surprisingly, wasn't much better off. After I informed him of Kia's real intentions, he broke things off with her too. He had thought she genuinely cared for him, but once the truth came out, he saw her for what she really was, a gold digger who was using him to get what she wanted. Andrew moved out of the mansion soon after, leaving me to finally take ownership and move forward with my life. 6 months after the divorce, I finally transferred the mansion into my name. I had saved up enough money for the paperwork, and it felt like closing a chapter of my life that I never wanted to revisit. I even had the house repainted and the pool cleaned. It was my way of starting over. One day, during the cleaning, Kia showed up at the property. She tried to enter, telling the workers that she was my wife. They called me, and I told them to throw her out. She screamed at me, saying that I had abandoned her, that everything she did was for us. But by then, her words meant nothing to me. I realized something important through all of this. Sometimes, the people closest to you can be the most dangerous. Their proximity gives them power. And if their intentions are impure, that power can be devastating. Kia was someone I loved, someone I thought I could trust. But her love was a mask. Her loyalty was a lie. And her true motives were rooted in greed. She wanted the mansion, the money, the status, and she was willing to betray me. To betray everything we had, just to get it. In the end, she lost everything. Not only did she lose me, but she also lost Andrew, and any chance of getting the mansion she so desperately wanted. She had dug her own grave with her lies and manipulations, and there was no way out for her. As for me, I finally found peace. The mansion, once a symbol of my mother's love and legacy, had turned into a battleground of deceit and betrayal. Now, it was just my home again, a place where I could heal and move on. There's a lesson here for anyone listening. Greed can turn the most beautiful things ugly. It can ruin relationships, destroy trust, and leave nothing but emptiness behind. Kia's greed blinded her to the value of what we had, and she ended up with nothing. I'm not saying I came out of this unscathed. The scars of betrayal run deep, but I survived. And I came out stronger. And that, to me, is worth more than any mansion or fortune. So, if you ever find yourself doubting someone, trust your gut. Sometimes, what you see is exactly what is happening. And remember, true love isn't about possessions or manipulation, it's about honesty, loyalty, and trust. Without those, love is just a hollow word, an empty promise. Thank you for sticking around to hear my story. I hope it serves as a reminder to cherish what really matters and to never let greed cloud your vision of what is truly important in life. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more real-life stories that are just as shocking and, hopefully, insightful.